pod bay doors, please, Hal.
A creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill. A mindless eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws. This is Universal's extraordinary motion picture version of Peter Benchley's best-selling novel, Jaws.
I just found out that a girl got killed here last week. And you knew it. You knew there was a shark out there. You knew it was dangerous. But you let people go swimming anyway.
Did you see that?
It's all psychological. You yell barracuda. Everybody says, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
Is it true that most people get attacked by sharks in 3 feet of water, about 10 feet from the beach?
Yeah. What we are dealing with here is a perfect engine, an eating machine.
We're not only going to have to close the beach, we're going to have to hire somebody to kill the shark.
Bad fish, but I'll catch him and kill him.
Did you hear your father? Out of the water now!
This shark, swallow you whole.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
That's a 20-footer.
25. 3 tons of them.
Hold it up, he's coming straight for us. Don't screw it up now.
Don't wait for me. Now! Shoot!
What's the tail? Give him room!
I can't! He's trying to run! Oh! Come quick! I can't hold it! Hurry!
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com and also ArmchairOscars.com. And joining me on this little boat is my co-host, the critic, historian, and dare I say legend from TalkMovieToMe.com, the one and only Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
Now, Jerry, we all know if you just yell barracuda, everybody's going to go, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on the 4th of July.
We are talking today, of course, about Dude, Where's My Car?
One of the classics. One of the nouveau classics.
Oh, we are celebrating the 4th of July with, we're talking about Jaws today. And I got to tell you, this is one of those movies that's been with me forever.
Oh, sure.
One of the first movies I ever saw. And I'm so glad because we're starting our 2nd season. Congratulations. Yay. With a movie that is, this is strange to say, but it's almost like an old friend.
Mm.
You have movies like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't remember when you first saw them, but you've seen them so many times that it's like visiting old friends. And so with that, this episode, by the way, is dedicated to my dad. A little late for Father's Day, but this is one of his favorite movies, and he introduced me to this. So
okay.
This is my Father's Day gift. When did you first see this?
I don't think I saw this until high school. Actually, this was one of those that I knew about, obviously, and I knew the the score, or at least the theme.
Oh, who didn't?
But um, I don't think I'd actually sat and watched the movie until I was maybe 16, 17 years old.
Mm.
So this was not one of my first movies. This was part of my exploration. E.T. was the same way. I didn't see that until high school either, which is weird because that was like the movie that should have defined my childhood.
Yeah.
I
Well, with
saw
that
the
one,
end of it at a birthday party. You know, his chest glowing and everything, but I
with
didn't.
that one, I'll say I was blessed to have been 10 years old when that came
Right.
out.
I was
Um,
I was about one. So
yeah, you're about a decade behind me.
yeah.
This one, there's a collection of movies, and eventually we'll get to them all. There's a collection of movies that I saw, I think, when my long-term memory really kicked in,
Hmm.
and I was lucky enough. I am lucky enough to be the exact same age as Steven Spielberg's film career.
That's true.
Duel appeared on television. I believe it was on ABC,
Hmm.
maybe.
I think so.
Appeared on ABC on Saturday, November 13th, 1971. 24 hours before I was born. I was born with Steven Spielberg's film career. And like I say, this is one of the first movies I ever saw. And it is remarkable. I don't know of a movie that could have been that was supposed to be such a complete disaster.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, there's
And everything that went wrong with it contributed to its success.
yeah. Yeah, it's funny, you know, the legend behind, the shark isn't working and that they'd have to sit around and then they'd announce the shark is working, the shark is working, and then everybody would hop to and start to and the shark is still working, and they'd get something else done, and this was a nightmare shoot.
Mm.
I mean, for everybody involved.
But it contributed so much. There were so many contributions that didn't work that ended up so contributing. The fact that the shark didn't work
Hmm.
meant that he was forced to make the ocean into a villain on its own.
Right.
You didn't see the shark most of the time because it didn't work.
Right, and he was forced to invent. And I wrote a paper on this in college. I did the voyeurism of Jaws,
Mhm.
where there's actually a first-person perspective of the shark.
Yeah,
You get to see the shark's eye view roaming up and coming up, and
that's how the movie opens.
yeah, it's incredibly unique and incredibly terrifying to have the attempt at going into the shark's mind without any words, without any, this isn't Finding Nemo's precursor. This is just you just see the movement and going up and attacking. It's
Well, before we really get to the meat of this, we got to talk about one thing, and that's Chrissy Watkins. Because the way this movie opens is a punch in the gut.
hmm
You never see the shark at all.
right. You just see her being pulled back and forth.
She goes in the water, and then the whole attack takes place. You're not on the shore. You're not on a boat.
No, you're with her.
You're in the water with her, and you can't see it any more than she can. And there's that. I think the moment that gets me is when she's there, and then all of a sudden there's a tug.
And she just drops a little bit.
Yeah, and then she starts to panic. That
Hmm.
panic, and then it starts.
And I don't know
And
if it
it's
was dubbed in or what, but there's like a few times where she's like being wrenched around so hard that there's like a retching sound that she's like
oh yeah, the
you can
sound in this film is
hear
amazing.
her getting torn apart without her ever act because she was just in a harness being yanked around under the but it was I think it was she said it was really scary the way that they were
Hmm.
doing it. I wouldn't doubt it.
But again, you never see anything.
No, but you know what's going on.
And if it had started just with this peaceful Martha's Vineyard, it wouldn't have worked.
Mm-mm.
Because this opening scene, you absolutely know what you're up against for the next 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it's remarkable. It's remarkable in its restraint.
Right.
Because I think a much more nervous, panicky filmmaker would have given into the temptation to show a tail, a fin, something. I think that was originally in the plans.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it wasn't working, so they decided to just have it be her.
Right.
And that's where it should be.
Yeah, he improvised around it, and it was, uh, as they always say, necessity is the mother of invention. And if he'd had a fully working shark, or if this had been done 20 years later, and they would have been able to digitally put in the shark, the movie would have been terrible.
It would have been Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, which is, like I said, it would have been terrible.
But
You
the funny
can't
thing
kill
is,
Sam Jackson that way. I'm sorry.
but I'm going to tell you something. When I saw that scene with Sam Jackson and Deep Blue Sea, that scared me to death. That's a jump scare.
Yeah.
That's how you do a jump scare. But this one, it all takes place in reality.
Mm-hmm.
There's no heightened reality here. The whole texture of the film is for real.
Mm-hmm. Which is
So,
completely and totally violated by the sequels, by the way.
oh God,
I've never seen this is like when we did now I don't remember what it was, but Psycho, when we did Psycho, I have not seen any of these sequels either.
or Poltergeist.
Or Poltergeist. I refuse to sully.
Hmm.
It's I know that the fourth one is like the mate or the child of Jaws going after the mom or the kid. I'm like, I don't. Jaws the Revenge. It's like there's not that kind of a cognitive structure in Shark. They're not gonna know.
Yeah,
Like,
Charles' Revenge was terrible. We should talk also about where Spielberg was at this point, because he had only made one theatrical feature before this,
yeah,
and it did not do
it was
well.
a Sugarland Express, which
Sure,
is a good movie.
it's all right,
I liked it.
but this comes along, and boy, talk about a rocket to the moon. I mean,
Yeah.
this was the biggest movie in the world,
For a long time.
and it started this summer movie season.
Mhm.
We're currently in the middle of one of those.
Mm-hmm.
This summer, this idea of having big movies, big action movies, come out in the summertime, because this came out, nobody expected anything from it.
Right.
Because who's going to want to go see a movie about shark attacks?
Well,
You know,
it turns out everybody.
turns out everybody. And it was the biggest movie in the world until Star Wars 2 years later.
Right.
And starts and is the launch pad for this brilliant career
Mm-hmm.
that, to my mind, has never faltered. In 45 years, has never faltered. And he's my favorite American director.
He's made some stinkers, though.
He's made some stinkers, but you can never say that his career has been in the dumps.
No, that's true. For every stinker he makes, he comes back with at least a better. Even his stinkers make money, though.
But it's also interesting to me that this was a movie where he took a pop culture book
Yeah.
and made it better, because I've read the book, and it's one of those where it's really bulky and there's a lot of characters and a lot of side plots. He took the meat of it and turned that into a film. There's a lot in the book that's like there's the mayor. One of the reasons that he wants to keep the beaches open is because he has ties to the mob.
Oh.
And there's this whole thing. Hooper is having an affair with Brody's wife, and all of this stuff. And the end of the book, the shark gets away.
Huh.
So, if you had made this movie out of the book, it wouldn't have worked.
No. Well, I mean, it's a lot like, and I haven't read this book, but it's a lot like what Coppola did with The Godfather.
Yeah, he took the most interesting parts.
Yeah. And threw away the trash.
Yeah.
Literally.
But, yeah. And so, by doing that, and by not having a shark that works, he slims it down to these characters, these interesting people, and this situation that's going on. And that's another thing is that I'm interested in, is the fact that the shark attacks that happen in this film are not the whole movie.
No, there's only
two or three.
There's three. There's the girl at the beginning,
Mm.
then there's the Kittner boy, and then there's the guy in the pond.
And then there's Quint.
Well, yeah, at the end, until the end, on the Orca, there's only three off the beach.
Mm.
So it's not the center point is really Brody.
Yeah.
All the way through.
And the funny thing is, the problem that comes up with this, the idea that there's a shark in the area and it's killed somebody, and the fact that it's happening, the mayor's response is not unreasonable. And he says, we depend on tourist dollars for our lives.
Yeah, because they need those businesses depend on it because they're in the off season nobody's going there.
Right, right.
But I've always loved the way that he describes it when he's being interviewed on television. He goes, and apparently there was a shark in the waters that apparently injured a few bathers, but we caught something and now everything it's like injured a few bathers. It ate two people before. Like,
there are body parts in a tub.
Yeah. But it's a beautiful day.
Yeah. Amity means friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he is trying to save face. You get it.
Yeah.
You do get it.
But at the same time, he's in denial that it's as bad as it is, because
until his own son gets hurt,
or was in the waters when the guy in the pond got taken. Like, he's in shock. He's like, "Oh, we could still save August." It's like, no, you missed that boat.
You missed the 4th of July, because when news of this gets out, you're dead. You're sunk.
You're going to be the mayor of Shark City, and you're out there saying that you want the beaches open.
Yeah, some of the visual texture in this, some of the visual cues in this film are brilliant, because to have that meeting where they're sitting, where all of those merchants are sitting around waiting for an answer, and you realize that this whole thing could destroy everybody in this room. You know, if news of this gets out and tourism drops, they're dead.
Yeah.
You know, they're on water and crackers for the winter.
Right, as Quint says, you're on welfare for the winter.
Right. And by the way, his introduction.
The fingernails on the chalkboard.
I have to hit the mute button when this comes on. It just starts that fingernails on the blackboard thing. I had a teacher once that did that. You know those those old things they used to have with the where the teacher could put five pieces of chalk in the thing and then make the lines on the blackboard.
Yeah.
Would run it down the. That'll make you pay attention. But it's just interesting to me that it focuses on the problem.
Yeah.
The movie is not about the attacks. It's focused on the problem, on what's going on the things that are happening here, because you are more emotionally invested in this, not just because people are being eaten up, but because this thing is going to eat up the entire town financially.
Yeah.
It's going to kill them. There's more than just bathers at stake here.
Right.
And I love the idea that the person in charge of all of this is new to the island, so he's us.
Yeah, it's his first summer. It's Brody's first summer there, and man, Roy Scheider.
Yeah.
You're hard pressed to find a bad Roy Scheider performance, but man.
Yeah.
This is one of his signature roles. You think of Roy Scheider, you're gonna think of this, maybe the French
Maybe
Connection,
all that jazz,
and if you're my age, Sequest.
Yeah. Yeah. And just this ordinariness, because there's always the character that Spielberg installs in every film, who's us, that we immediately sort of couch our expectations in. Every movie has one. Every one of his movies has one. And here it's interesting that he puts a person in the middle of this who is not only new in town, but is also afraid of the water.
Right.
So that adds this extra level. So you think, okay, he can do something about it, but he can't do anything about it.
Right.
And in trying to find somebody to deal with this, he's panicking.
Yeah, and I love it how what is it? Hooper says to him, living on an island isn't exactly the best idea if you're afraid of water. He goes, it's only an island if you look at it from the shore. That doesn't make any sense, Brody.
But I love, though, how, and Spielberg is good at this, going back to the whole thing with the merchants, how this movie, for the first hour, creates this community. Most movies, if you notice, focus on one person.
Yeah.
Or focus on two people. This movie focuses on the whole town. There's a whole bunch of people here.
You get to recognize people. He gives names to people. One of the lines birthed Bryan Singer's production company. That's a Bad Hat Harry.
Oh, Bad Hat Harry. Yeah. But it's interesting. It's just it's a closed-in community. It's an island. It's an island, and they're very exclusive. They know each other. It's during that time when people just knew who, you knew your next door neighbor. You knew who you went to church with. You knew who you bought groceries from. It's that kind of community. That's very, very difficult to write in the language of film. That is very, very difficult. And not have it be so confused. It's a very Robert Altman approach.
Yes.
The opening of this film with all of these people is a very Robert Altman approach. When you have people who talk over each other, there's a group of people in a room and they're all talking at once, and it's an interesting way of communicating this.
Coincidentally, this came out the same year as Nashville, and neither one of them won anything at the Oscars.
Right.
Both of them were nominated out the wazoo.
I thought Verna Fields did, the editor.
Oh, maybe she did.
Maybe she did. I don't remember. But yeah, the editing in this film is brilliant too, because when you get to a scene like when the Kittner boy is killed, it's interesting because the bulk of that attack takes place from the shore.
Yeah, it's he holds back. This is distinctively from Brody's point of view.
Mm.
He does a lot of point of view shots, but then he reverses it and does an opposite vertigo shot.
Mm. Or he pulls back.
Well, he pushes in and zooms out.
Yeah.
To make the back look farther away, but you get closer to Brody. It's the opposite of the way Hitchcock shot that sequence in Vertigo, where he pulled out and zoomed in to make the things elongate, the buildings elongate. So he took that and made it opposite, so that everything got further away from him, but he got closer to the camera.
Yeah.
Kind of a brilliant. I mean, the camera work in this is remarkable too. But to see that you see out in the distance, you see kind
There's
of the shark
something.
and the yellow raft, and then all.
There's something that looks. If you're looking at it from the distance, it's something looks like a bug,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see something yellow,
Mm-hmm.
which is his raft,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see something red,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody notices.
Yeah, everybody's like splashing around and
Going about their business.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody notices this going on.
Until it's too late.
And he eats the dog. Oh my god. Here's a funny thing.
You knew the dog wasn't gonna make it. It's a movie.
I felt for some reason I always feel worse for the dog. I don't know why.
Let me posit that is because you've met people. I don't.
Yeah. Yes.
It's much better to meet a dog.
Here's the funny thing. We will accept blood and guts from human beings on the screen all day long. But when it comes to dogs and cats, we won't stand for it. Why is that?
Well, like Coppola got more letters about the horse head than he did any of the dozen murders that happened in
The Godfather. You can slaughter people all day long, but you kill a dog.
You kill a dog, and the letter writing campaign is equivalent to John Wick's response after his dog gets killed.
Yeah.
Just take it down the Russian mafia.
But again, it comes back to the mayor, because the mayor is again still trying to save face, because they go out and they hire all of these wannabe shark hunters.
Well, it wasn't even him. It was Mrs. Kittner.
Mrs. Kittner goes out. They go out and hire all of these wannabe shark hunters, and it's a comedy scene, really.
It's hilarious.
Where you've got all these idiots in these tiny fantail launch boats, and they're going out with dynamite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've got a boat out, and it's got like 12 people piled on it.
He's like, the sheriff wanted me to tell you that you're exceeding the safety regulations. Ah, shut up! They're all gonna die. Those guys aren't gonna make it. Those guys aren't gonna make it out of the harbor alive.
And one of them doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's just funny because there's this wonderful shot where he goes out, and there's like 30 boats in the harbor, and they're all bumping into each other trying to get out there, and it's just it's just funny to me that a movie like this has time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it interesting that this movie has time for scenes like that, and just scenes for little character things like that?
And then there's that dockmaster who was apparently a local,
Yeah.
they got him to try to get one of the actors to talk like him, and they're just like, no, let's just put you. It's like the Arlie Ermy situation in Full Metal Jacket. They're like, why don't you just do this? And
And he just walks out and he just looks around and he shakes his head and he's he just
but then when he's on the boat, just wait until we get out and we get into those rocks. They'll wish that their mothers had never met their father. It sounded like W.C. Fields.
yeah.
Like, and he's just leaning on the windscreen, like.
Yeah. I tell you, the scene in this movie that turns my stomach is when Matt Huber comes in and he starts doing the autopsy.
Ooh, yeah,
And
and
he
he picks
picks
up
up
the
that
hand.
yeah, he picks up that arm and it's been bitten in half. It's like that was the scene when I saw this as a kid. I left the room because that just turned my stomach.
Well, I love his reaction too. Like he's trying to be all professional, and as soon as the tarp goes up, he's like, oh, like the smell
Yeah.
gets to like hits him immediately, and it's
I thought of that scene in Silence of the
mm-hmm,
Lambs when they're in the
mm-hmm,
funeral parlor and they put the stuff under their nose
mm-hmm.
because you can only imagine. And he starts describing it, and this is the funny thing. He shows you the arm, but he largely describes what he's looking at,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the girl is not there.
Right.
What's going on in your head while he's describing it is so much worse than what he would have been looking at.
Oh yeah, yeah. If they would have done like an overhead shot or something,
Yeah, it wouldn't have
it
worked.
would have been gross. But it's like he is painting a picture with those words that just
Right. This whole movie does that.
yeah.
This whole movie, a
It
lot of
has
this
to.
movie does. A lot of this movie does take place in words,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes place in words, dialogue. Um, Again, yeah, like you say, because it has to. Because, and it works much better that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't have, what's in your head is much more interesting. Because when you're thinking about the shark running around in the water while all those legs are flapping back and forth
Mm-hmm.
while they're, if you saw when you saw this shark at the end of the movie, when I see this shark at the end of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
it's a mechanical shark.
Well, obviously, yeah.
But when you're looking at it, when it finally rears up, you're thinking, well, that looks mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And if you saw that through the whole movie, the movie would have been dead in the water because
Literally.
you're literally.
I enjoyed that Spielberg took a very Hitchcockian approach to this.
Oh, very much so.
Very much like Psycho and a lot of his other, like, you don't know, and Vertigo, really. You don't know the true machinations or the person behind all of it until the very end. Just like
Right.
you don't see the shark until the very end. He rears up, slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Why didn't he come down here and chum some of this shit?
Probably the greatest gif ever.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how he tries to get the mayor to really understand what's going on and what needs to be done. And even the professional can't explain it to him because they're trying to. Because the shark expert, played by Richard, played wonderfully, probably in my favorite Richard Dreyfuss performance.
This is
Even he can't get him to reason
yeah.
this out.
This is I really like Richard Dreyfuss, but this and Close Encounters are my two favorites. Uh, I always kind of regret that he won his Oscar for The Goodbye Girl because I've never really been a huge fan of that movie. Just
Yeah, even he said it came too early.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just and it's just a filmed play, and there's a
Yeah.
whole there are dimensions missing from that just he got on my nerves, which
Hmm.
that's that's not a good thing. If you can get Richard Dreyfuss to get on your nerves, you need to dial back the movie.
He's
Like,
such an intelligent actor. He's such an intelligent actor that um, when he's in the room, you can sense that you're with a very smart person.
hmm
So when he's in a dumb movie, all you're thinking about is, why are you here?
yeah,
You should be playing a scientist, a doctor, a professional of some sort. You should be playing somebody, even when he plays an everyman like he does in The Lineman in Close Encounters,
hmm
you sense his intelligence. Here, that's present as well, but he's playing basically a professional who's his family is wealthy, but that doesn't mean that he's dumb.
right.
That doesn't mean that he's out of his element. He's completely in his element,
hmm
which is interesting because when you get him mixed with this old sea salt, this Quint character, when you get those two on board a ship, they're in two different places professionally.
Yet their knowledge is almost identical.
Right. They just have a different approach to the same problem.
Right. And I've always that part when Hooper comes in and he's like, "Let me see your hands, soft hands. You've been counting money all your life."
I don't need this working class hero crap. This is a movie where you notice the extra.
hmm
You notice that there's always something extra
hmm
that you wouldn't get in a lesser film.
Right.
The great thing about that scene is what happens next, because Brody turns to Quint and he says, "You're not going to do this on the boat, are you?"
Right.
And there's a look in his eyes that's like, "We're depending on you.
hmm
You know, we have lives, and we need to solve a problem. This doesn't need to be going on out there."
hmm
I like that extra because one thing that this movie, I think if this movie were made today, this would have gone. The relationship between Brody and his wife
hmm
is very small and it takes place on the sides of the film, but you get the sense of two people who have been together for years
hmm
and who have um, she's very she's every bit of a police officer's wife.
Right. But you also know that she has a lot of pull in the decision making because
Yes.
if you notice when they're doing they ask him why he would come there and he says, well, in New York you lock up people every day, it doesn't seem to do any difference, but here in a small town, you can make a difference.
Mhm.
But if you notice when they're doing the scars, he's quiet but he lifts up his shirt. I think he got shot in the line of duty and she said, we're leaving.
I think it's an appendix scar.
Oh, is it?
I think that's what it was supposed to be. But yeah, that is a good point. It could have been, shot in the line of duty. Didn't want to mention it. But um, the interesting thing to me is when they're together and he's going off to do something, there's always a feeling from her that she wants to be the person that when he gets home, she's going to be the one thing in the world that is not going after him about something.
hmm
The calming sanctuary, the place to go where, all of this craziness is not happening.
Right.
There's a scene in the middle of the film where he's flipping through a book of shark attacks.
hmm
And it's that again, the filmmaking. He's flipping through these books and he stops, and the pictures keep getting worse and
Mm-hmm.
worse and worse and worse and worse. He sees these guys that have caught a shark. He sees some people heading out. Then he sees a shark, and then he sees a shark out on the horizon. Then he sees a shark bite. Then he sees somebody with a chunk taken out of their side, and it
Yeah.
just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And
And I
she startles him.
Yeah, and I think to play off of that is right after that. Like he's getting all worked up about like all these shark bites and how terrible everything is, and she's just like, "Oh, let Michael stay in his boat." But he's like, "Ah, I want him off the water." And then she opens or he throws the book and she looks and it's a picture of a shark chewing through a boat. And she's like,
Mhm.
"Michael, did you hear your father? Get out of the boat."
What I love is the fact that after going through the anxiety of looking through all of this, she just sits down and want to get drunk and fool around.
Yes.
Is she gives him these moments just to kind of decompress.
Hmm.
And their relationship, like I say, it's not much of the movie, but it's beautifully constructed.
Hmm.
Because you don't because sometimes when you have people who are married in films, you just feel like you've got two actors that are just put together in a room.
Hmm.
Here you feel like, they've got kids,
Hmm.
and but they've spent time together.
Well, and I think his relationship with his kids is even smaller in the movie, but
Hmm.
it's really it's all summed up in that dinner table when
Yeah.
he's deep in thought, he's moving, and the youngest boy is mimicking him all the way through, and then he notices it and starts making those faces to him. That's such a beautiful moment that would not be in any other shark movie, thriller, anything.
It's not necessary, but it is
It
necessary.
is, yeah.
It's not necessary to the larger film, but it is. I've got kids, and my kids love me, and
Hmm.
my kids watch me, and it's just this connectivity to when you connect it to the larger story, you realize there are personal issues at stake.
Right.
I've got to do this for myself and for my kids,
Hmm.
and you realize, and then Matt Hooper comes in and he sits at the table and he starts telling the story about this shark. He got a boat, I think, for his birthday. He comes in and he starts talking about how
It
he
ate
got attacked
everything.
by a baby thresher shark
Yeah.
and it ripped the thing apart. So he's been there.
Yeah.
It's a comic
I
scene, but
love
he's been there.
her the way she puts it. So you're in sharks.
Yeah.
Well, I've never heard it put quite that way, but yes. And then I didn't know what you were having, so I brought white and red. And he just opens the thing and just starts dumping it into this
Yeah, yeah. You want to let
tall
that breathe? Okay.
juice glass. And then he pours his wife a regular drink of orange. And he's got
I
this.
just love it when he comes in and he's like, "I brought red wine, white wine. I didn't know what you were having for dinner." It's like these are blue collar folks. It doesn't matter.
And and he's not eating. Is anybody eating this? And he immediately takes the plate and starts going like, no,
Hmm.
no, nobody is.
Yeah.
And he goes, let's have one more drink, and then cut that shark open.
Yeah, because they caught a tiger shark, and the mayor is trying to play it off. It's like this is the one. This is the one that
I love that. The bite radius isn't right. And he goes, well, what kind of shark is it? Tiger shark. A what?
What? You don't even know what you caught.
A what?
And they're trying to play it off, and this tiger shark is tiny.
Hmm.
It's tiny. Anybody who saw that arm would know this shark did not do that.
Well, I mean, in general, if you think about the Kittner kid, there's no way that would have been able to
No, not at all.
make the kid disappear.
Mhm.
Like, but shark's a shark to people who don't understand how things work. or don't
or who
want
want to
to.
wrap
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
up,
yeah, yeah.
or who want to wrap this up, you know, and get this off the books and get this out of the press before the 4th of July crowd comes in. By the way, I've got to mention one of the most brilliant shots in this is right after Brody and Hooper try to explain to the mayor what's going on, and they turn around and they see that giant ship coming into the harbor with all of those tourists on it. And you just realize they've just compounded a bigger problem because you just brought the snack tray to the shark. You know?
Yeah, I mean it's a hot lunch buffet.
And
It's
that's a big boat
yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of people, and like nobody's going in the water.
Hmm.
It's-
Yeah,
You go in, it's
because
like,
they've
well, I
heard.
just put some suntan lotion on and I wanted to absorb some of the sun. Get in there.
Get in. I can't remember. It's been a little while. I think this is the scene where the guy gets killed in the rowboat. I can't remember.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, that's a rough scene.
See, I actually rewatched this. I didn't have to, just like The Godfather had killed, but like I didn't have to rewatch it. But boy, do I take pretty much any opportunity to. Like,
Yeah, I watch this every couple of years. I actually went to see this in a theater
hmm.
um, in 2015 when the 40th anniversary.
I want to say I saw it in the theater too, but it might have just been that I saw that it was in the theater. I don't remember. I think I saw it in the theater though.
Yeah, this was an experience when it first came out because um, we always like to say this about Star Wars, but really this is the film that started that whole thing with people who would go to the theater, watch the movie, and then come out and get right back in line
Mm,
and go see it again.
mm,
This was a phenomenon of that.
mm.
Um,
The
and
first blockbuster.
right, the first blockbuster, the first really huge summer blockbuster. But and again, it all comes together by accident. The one thing we've got to talk about, and that's Robert Shaw, who gives the best performance in this movie, in my opinion. I mean,
English actor, and you would never know he was
and you would
British.
never know. I did not know he was English for years. I did not know that. I thought he just talked like that. I had not seen From Russia with Love.
Or
And,
apparently The Sting.
yeah, yeah. But and how this performance didn't get an Oscar nomination, I don't know. But uh, he's basically playing Captain Ahab
Yeah.
because he's got something to prove. He's this whole thing again. He and Hooper are in two different places, but this has been with him longer,
Hmm.
some 30 years, because the whole movie stops
Oh, the
when he tells the
Indianapolis
story
story. Oh.
of the Indianapolis when they were on their way to Tinian Lady,
Hmm.
and they were on their way home, and the thing got hit by a Japanese sub, and they were out there for a few days, and they were just getting picked off one by one.
You see, this is another testament to just how riveting Spielberg can make something and how an actor can completely just hold your attention in a scene. Another filmmaker would have tried to scrape the budget together to do a cutaway,
Yeah,
to do a
yeah,
flashback
flashback.
with him narrating and all of this. But this is just, you see him, it's tight on him, it pulls in, you see the reaction of Brody, you kind of see Hooper in the shot, and just like both of them are captivated and mesmerized by this
The way
story.
that slips in also is the fact that they're getting drunk.
Uh, they've gotten.
They're drunk because this is an interesting. Again, you talk about the scenes that would have gone. The fact that they are on the boat and they are at odds at all times. From the moment they get on the boat, they're at each other's throats.
Comparing scars.
And they have dinner, and then they start drinking, and they get drunk, and then Hooper and Quint start comparing scars, and it gets sillier and sillier and sillier. And then Brody says, "What about that one on your arm?" And it used to be a tattoo.
Let me guess.
And then
Mother.
That's Marianne Moffat. She broke my heart. Yeah. But it's funny, just the way that it suddenly, when he points out that scar, it just suddenly turns serious.
Right, and even Hooper just laughing feels completely out of place where 10 seconds earlier everybody was
You
having a
notice
good
the
time.
laughing when he hears that, the laughing sort of dissipates.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're going into this story, and it's again captivating, and it plays into, the last thing he says is, "I'll never put on a life jacket again,"
Mm-hmm.
and then it plays into how he dies,
Mm-hmm.
and which again, I can't watch that scene.
It's hard.
I love this character so much, I can't. But the third act of this movie is interesting too, because I think if another filmmaker were making this movie, that third act would have been the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
It would have just been it would have been a few shark attacks.
The first
and then,
20 minutes would have been the attacks, and then the whole rest of it would have been out on the ocean.
Yeah, because for the first hour and a half, he's playing with you. There's that scene where the two guys are out there with the holiday roast.
That is hilarious. And
the two guys
terrifying.
go out at night. Yeah, the two guys go out at night. They have this giant, scary-looking hook, and they throw the roast out, and the shark is so big,
it just rips the pier out. It rips the dock
rips
out.
the pier out from under them, and they're able to swim to shore. And the guy
Don't
says,
look back. Just trust me, and don't look behind you. Just swim.
they get to the shore, and he's like, "Can we go home now?"
Yeah.
Oh, and also, one of the scariest scenes in this movie is when they go out, because they cut the shark open, and they realize it's full of just junk.
Mm-hmm.
So they go out to look for it, and
Ooh, the Ben Harper boat scene. Yeah.
yeah, and he says, "So we're going out on a boat. Well, if we're looking for a shark, we're not going to find it on the land."
I'm not drunk enough to go on a boat. Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
But they go out there, and he's looking around, and he finds Ben Gardner's boat, and he finds that tooth.
Mm-hmm.
This scene made me pee my pants, just about. I mean, it just, when I first saw this, I think I jumped up and left the room, because that head that just suddenly appears out of the hole in the side. And Spielberg said he learned a lesson from this, because he went back and put this shot in, and he's I think this was in post. He went back and he put this shot in because he said, I need one more jump.
Mm-hmm.
And he put that scene in, and he said he went to the screening, and the people threw their popcorn in the air. Everybody was screaming. And the scene where, at the end, where Brody is chumming, and the shark comes up.
People laugh.
And he said it got half the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It was fool me once.
Mm-hmm.
Shame on me. And he said, I learned my lesson. I can't fool the audience twice like that.
Right.
But that scene where he he's chumming, and all of a sudden the shark rears up. The editing again. He cuts to Brody, and Brody just kind of stands stuck still. He kind of comes out of stage right, stands straight
hanging
up
out of his mouth, backs all the way up into the cabin. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
because he keeps calling for a bigger boat. And then finally, Quint just destroys the radio. It's like, I can do this, you know. But again, it's interesting because they developed these three characters. They're all in the same place, but for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Brody doesn't want to be there,
No.
obviously.
It really doesn't.
Hooper really wants to see this from a scientific point of view because he's taking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's that scene where he's get out on the edge. I want to get a perspective shot. And then, of course, Quint is playing Captain Ahab because he wants to kill this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so great because Quint is willing to put everybody in danger and destroy this boat.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you talk about the visual language. Our visual representation of this shark are those barrels.
Right. And that whole thing, like they got the 3 barrels in it, 3,
Mm-hmm.
and
Starts with 5.
right, and well, I think he starts with 6 because they got 1 in, and then that one he got out of that one,
Mm-hmm.
and then they put 3 more in. And he's like, "Okay, Chief, we're going back to shore," but then he knows that he's gonna blow the engine because he
Mm-hmm.
wants to be out there alone with it,
Right.
without any way of getting away, without either one of those two being able to stop him. No radio, no engine. They're there, and that's going to be where he makes his last stand, which ended out pretty much exactly like Custer's.
Mm-hmm. But he has these. One of my favorite moments is when he's got the fishing rod, and it starts to click.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that one little, again, a very Hitchcockian moment.
And then you just see him kind of slowly hook his
Put the
harness.
belt on.
Yeah, and hook the harness into it.
And he tells Brody, "Get behind me."
Yeah.
Because it builds. It's just very, very tense. It's like it's in the area. Because there's that shot of the reel is in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
And you see Brody in a close-up, or you see Quint in a close-up behind it. And that one little click. And it's like, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they the whole thing ends. I mean, that thing just rips this boat into tiny little pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, in the book, I think Brody actually gets eaten, or Hooper actually gets eaten because it does rip the cage open. And
instead, I will endlessly adore that Hooper's like all this kind of bravado when I want to get up close to it, but when everything hits the fan every time, he spooks and runs away.
Yeah.
He spooks and drops the tooth and runs away. He spooks and runs away with the cage, which was a perfect way. They were going to, when they were shooting this, Spielberg had gotten a couple of a couple who was a Australian shark documentarians, basically. Mm-hmm. And he tasked them with getting footage of a great white, because great whites are more out in South Pacific and not in, Martha's Vineyard.
Which is why this is so unusual.
You're right. It's a rogue shark. And they had this footage with this great white getting tangled in the line on a shark cage, and they were gonna like put a little person in there for like perspective, but it was too dangerous and they couldn't do it, and then it got caught, and so they had to figure out a way to get Hooper out of the cage because they really wanted to use that footage. So I think they concocted that whole thing simply so that they could use that footage.
Right. I find it interesting also that Quint wants so badly to get up close to it, but then he thinks Hooper is crazy for getting in the cage and going in the water with it.
Right. This goes in the water. You go in the water. You go in this. Shark's in the water. You're in the water.
You got any better suggestions? Because they're running out of options.
Yeah, and he's gonna try to stab this needle into his mouth. It's like, are you serious? Like,
Yeah. It's like, have you ever done this before? It's like,
it's like when you see the movies or the TV shows with the doctor, and they're like, okay, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to go in, and we're gonna have to do this, 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 and this, and they're like, okay, you sound like you know what you're doing. You've done this a bunch of times. It's like, no, I read about it in med school.
Yeah.
Like,
Saw it done once.
Yeah.
But it's
I
interesting
saw it in
that
an operating theater in med school. It's like, oh boy.
he puts him down for all the equipment that he's bringing on board, but finally when it gets down to it, it's like, okay, we're out of options.
Right, because at one point before, like when the first barrel's in, and he has that tracker on it, which why they didn't use, I don't know. Because I would assume that it was a radio tracker and that he had a way to track it, but they never follow up on that one.
Right.
But he says to him, I have things on board that will kill it. But he wants to kill it, preserve the carcass, and take it in and try to figure out what happened with it.
Right, because we see him in his little thing boiling the flesh off of the bones. I think that's what he wants.
When they start pulling him back and he goes, I got a taxidermist.
He's gonna have a heart attack when you see what I broke him.
You know what? The shot that I love the most is when you see them pulling out of the harbor on their way in the Orca, and the camera goes through the shark mouth. Like you're seeing
that's a
them
Hitchcock
through
scene.
the shark's through the shark's mandible. It's like, that is, if that isn't foretelling, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Well, again, everybody in the world knows how this movie ends. I mean, he finally
smile, you shoots, son of a.
Well, he shoots the thing. He shoots an air tank, which Hooper has told him will blow up, which was completely debunked years later by MythBusters.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't happen. Would have to be under specific conditions. Would have to be this, and he finally blows it up into. Yeah, I don't care. I don't really care. But into this gory, spectacularly gory rain of just shark parts. Just like
and I think I mentioned this when we did Jurassic Park, but the sound that the shark that Jaws makes as it's going down after its head has been blown off is a combination of the dual truck and I think a bear and something and another animal. So it's like a combination. But he wanted to get the dual truck, the sound that the dual truck made when it went off the cliff.
Right, and they also used that. He also used that in Poltergeist, which was the sound of the tree coming through the window.
So he uses that sound. The sound from Duel with the truck is throughout his filmography, which is really clever. It's really interesting.
I'm sure it's in Raiders somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure. So that's kind of all I've got on.
And I have seen the sequels.
I'm sorry.
I'll just mention the second one. It's not terrible. I'll just say that basically there's another shark. He's got to go fix it because his sons are out in the water and with their friends, and their friends are being picked off one by one, and It's really kind of terrible. And what they do with the Hooper character is really bad because they say there's a throwaway line because Richard Dreyfuss is not in it, but they do this throwaway line where he's in somewhere until next spring. So for a second you're hoping that he'll be in the movie, and it's like, no, he's off, in Australia or something. And it's like, oh,
He'd never get here in time.
yeah. Roy Scheider had to be drugged into that movie.
I think
did not want to
I
do
think
that.
what you mean is he had to be drugged into that movie.
Yeah. He had to be drugged. I mean, just, every minute of that movie. Spielberg wanted nothing to do with it. It was like, I've already made my movie. It was made by this French director who seems to be one of those directors for hire. His name is Gino Swark, who made a movie I liked that everybody else hated, the Christopher Reeve movie, Somewhere in Time.
Oh, yeah.
Which we talked about before.
Yeah.
He made that movie, but he seems to be the director for hire when the original director that they have drops out of the project. I think he directed Supergirl. But Jaws 2, it made a lot of money, but Jaws 3 is terrible. They tried the 3D, and it was bad. That takes place at SeaWorld. And, of course, Jaws the Revenge. The biggest legacy of Jaws the Revenge is that Michael Caine was not around to accept his Academy Award for Hannah and Her Sisters because he was in the Bahamas making that movie. That's the biggest legacy of Jaws the Revenge.
Now, see, that I didn't know. I remember when he won for the Cider House Rules, and he goes, "Oh, come on, just get me a little bit more time. I wasn't here for the last one."
No, he was in the Bahamas making that, so he could not accept his award for Hannah and Her Sisters. You made the best movie of your career. You accepted it. You got an award for the best movie of your career while making the worst movie of your career. But, of course, I'll watch Michael Caine in anything.
Well,
Yeah.
But,
of course, as we said before, the legacy of this movie is the launching pad for one of the most brilliant careers of any director, probably any American director. I mean, when I was a kid, Spielberg and Lucas basically owned Hollywood.
Right.
Through all the films that Spielberg was making, through, and all the films, and of course the Star Wars movies and all of this, basically changed the texture of American film. And it really started here.
Yeah.
Because this was proof of a movie that should not have been anything.
Right. And there have been a lot of movies throughout that have overperformed where they thought that it was going to tank. I think Casablanca was the same. And,
yeah, Casablanca was just another movie.
Right. And what was it? Ingrid Bergman only did it so that she could get into, I think, For Whom the Bell Tolls, which she thought was a better picture. And nobody remembers that was even made. So I have to give credit where credit's due on this one, because largely this is Spielberg's show. Like, you get to see exactly what he's about. And he's made some bad movies, but even his bad movies have made a lot of money, with the exception of 1941, which didn't make any money.
I don't know of another director who is open and freely honest about his film work than Spielberg, because Spielberg will talk about even the films that didn't work.
Oh
like
yeah. And
1941.
he'll say, "I realize that this is terrible, and I know what I did wrong." and
Of that movie, he said that he had an opening joke that worked, and people were just hilarious. People were just laughing and they were having fun. He said, but for the next hour and a half, they were just it was like a funeral.
hmm
And he said, I realized I thought that I could. He said it didn't work. And I don't know. And most directors don't talk about the films that don't work.
Right, right, right. But he'll go in, he'll talk about um, how much he hated working on the Lost World Jurassic Park,
Mm.
um, and
Temple of Doom.
Temple of Doom. How he just there are some that go throughout that he's just like, yeah, I hated every second of this,
Yeah.
and it shows on the screen because I can tell you here, and here where I could have done a whole lot differently, but it's like the only positive thing he ever said about the Lost World was that he said he always, when he since he was a little kid, wanted to make a movie about King Kong with a dinosaur, and he
Yeah.
got to do that in the Lost World. But at that point, the amount of people who would say, "Mr. Spielberg, maybe that's not a good idea," had dwindled to about none.
Yeah. The people who could say no to Steven.
Right.
But
Um.
he's always been, and I guess you get this, the most personable director.
Mm-hmm.
He's not he never seems guarded at all. If I can recommend anything, if we move into recommendations, there's a documentary called Spielberg on Spielberg
That's a good one.
where he goes through and he talks about every film that he's ever made. He starts with Duel. You know, he talks about the Sugarland Express. He talks about Jaws, Close Encounters, Raiders. He talks about all of his films openly and honestly. And um, he's willing to say, you know, this movie didn't work
Mm-hmm.
when he gets to 1941, which I did a blog project a few years ago called "A Study on Spielberg." I shall post a link to that. Um, in which I went through the progression of his career, and it's always interesting to do that with a director because sometimes you can see there are dips in their career, and he did have a dip in his career a little bit after The Color Purple,
Mm-hmm.
because that was the era when he tried to remake A Guy Named Joe,
Yeah, always. Ugh.
always, and he made the Peter Pan movie, which didn't work, Hook,
Hook
and then
and Empire of the
Jurassic
Sun.
Park, yeah, Empire of the Sun, and then Jurassic Park and Schindler's List drop in the same year,
Yes.
and he's right back on track again,
Right.
you know.
And
But
and
you can
there,
always feel his passion.
yeah, and yeah, he hasn't faltered from there in the 25 years since.
Yeah, he's kind of gotten serious in the last few years. Ever since Schindler's List, I think the passion in his work has really moved over to the serious films,
Well,
and
yeah,
his blockbusters have kind of suffered for it.
yeah. I mean, but you can tell that he's having a lot of fun when he was making Adventures of Tintin and BFG. Um, but yeah, his big like War of the Worlds, we might be at odds on, but I did not like it all. Um,
Once you told me when we did our first episode that basically that was his commentary on 9/11.
mhm.
That gives me a very, very different view of War of the Worlds.
It's still not a good movie though.
It's still not great, but it does have that. I do see it differently now.
Yeah,
Um, I do think Minority Report is grossly
I
underrated.
think it's a magnificent movie. I think that's one of his best movies.
Mm,
I'll be with you on that one.
yeah.
If I had to recommend anything, this is such a unique picture. Even that I often imitated, never duplicated, as the
Oh,
genie said.
boy, how they tried.
Oh, what I would recommend, and this is purely for our hipster listeners' ironic pleasure. Uh, Samuel Fuller's Shark, which came out about 2 years after the two.
That's the one with Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, it is.
I saw that. You'll love this. I saw that when I was about 9 years old, I think, and I saw it on a UHF station.
Ooh.
They were showing it on a Sunday afternoon, and I just watched it. And even when I was like 8 years old, I was like, "This is terrible."
But
It doesn't have like, is it like shark with an exclamation
yeah, it is.
point?
Yeah, it is.
They
Yeah, it
used
is.
to do that.
Yeah.
They used to do that.
And it was Sam Fuller had been pretty prominent with some really good stuff before that.
Hmm.
Um, The Naked Kiss and several others.
Big Red One.
Well, that was later.
Yeah.
He didn't make the Big Red One. That was his returned form as it was after Shark.
Yeah.
Um,
Anything would have been a return to form after Shark.
so I think that about wraps it up here for us on Jaws. Jerry, what do we have coming up?
Next week is your choice. We are talking about 3 films that are remakes of each other, except for the first one. We're talking about Akira Kurosawa's Seventh Samurai. Seven Samurai.
Seven Samurai.
Seven Samurai. I keep screwing that up. The American remake, The Magnificent Seven, with Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen, and the remake of that, which is the 2016 film, also called The Magnificent Seven, with Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt.
And Ethan Hawke and Vincent D'Onofrio.
An all-star cast thrown together.
Oh yeah. It's a hodgepodge. But we'll talk about that. That was supposed to have been last episode.
But I screwed up the schedule.
Before our hiatus, but well, it was more so because Solo, like, and I'll probably say this again, Solo smuggled his way into our schedule and pushed everything back a bit. So
Oh, we just have to talk about Star
well,
Wars.
yeah,
We can't.
obviously. I mean, so that kind of altered our schedule up a little bit. But after the Seven Samurai, what do we have?
After the Seventh Samurai, we're going to talk about another trilogy. We're going to talk about The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1923, with Lon Chaney. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1939, with Charles Lawton. And then Disney's version. Which I haven't seen in years. And I'm not
I
really
think
looking
the
forward to
last
getting
time I
into
saw
it.
that was in the theater with
I did too.
with a girlfriend who really liked Disney movies. It was
I saw it with my grandmother.
and then after that, I thought I'd inject a little bit of total fun since July is usually when kids go to camp. We're going to visit some camp too with Russ Meyer's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Have you ever seen that one?
I may have. I think I saw it because Roger Ebert wrote it. It's been a lifetime since I've seen it.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
But I'm looking forward to going back in.
So that's what we have coming up for this month. We thank you for returning with us from our hiatus. Happy 4th of July week. I think it's on a Tuesday, so this will drop before. Or a Wednesday. I'm not looking at a calendar. So we thank you very much for listening on behalf of my co-host Jerry Dean Roberts, film critic for ArmchairCinema.com, ArmchairOscars.com, and on behalf of myself, Doug Heller, film critic and film historian for TalkMovieToMe.com. We urge you to check out our back episodes at www.thepodbaydoorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can also find us on Twitter at pod_bay and on Patreon at pod_bay. You can throw a tip into our virtual tip jar, just to let us know how you think we're doing. And if you can't afford that, just spread the word. We greatly appreciate the more the merrier on this one. Just let us proliferate out through the cosmos, I suppose. I know we're not on the radio, but you know, it is what it is. We thank you again very much, and the pod bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
Oh, the shark, babe, has such teeth, dear, and it shows them pearly white. Just a jackknife has old Maggie Heath, babe, and it keeps it out of sight. You know when that shark bites with his teeth, babe, scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves, though, wears old Maggie Heath, babe, so there's never a trace of red. Now on the sidewalk, ooh, Sunday morning, lies a body just oozing life. And someone sneaking round the corner. Could that someone be Mac the Knife? There's a tugboat down by the river, don't you know, where a cement bag just drooping on down. Oh, that cement is just, it's there for the weight to dare. 5 will get you 10 old Mackies back in town. Not you hear about Louis Miller? He disappeared, babe, after drawing out all his hard-earned cash. And now Maggie spins just like a sailor. Could it be our boy's done something rash? Now, Jenny Diver, yes, Susie Tawdry, ooh, Miss Lottie Lenya, and old Lucy Brown. Oh, the line forms on the right, babe. Now that Maggie's back in town. I said, Jenny Diver, whoa, Suki Tawdry, look out to Miss Lottie Lenya and old Lucy Brown. Yes, that line forms on the right, babe. Now that Maggie's back in town. Look out, old man.